Good afternoon. It is February the 23rd, and finally we have things to look forward to. Welcome to the In Results podcast. Alasdair, there's a sense of optimism today, isn't there?
Cautious, I think, Ben. Yeah, certainly. I think that it's interesting hearing feedback today. There's still some that are complaining that we're unlocking too quickly, and there's still some saying that we're overcautious. You can't please everybody, but I think that it's interesting. There's been politically, it's interesting. There seems to have been a change, a shift. I think the kind of under delivering and over promising that we saw arguably before Christmas, if you want to get political, is replaced with more cautious optimism. But we have targets. We of course still will be measuring how we're doing against those targets, and that's I think that's got to be the right thing to do. Also yesterday, although we're still waiting for details, there was a promise, of course, that the government will not let companies fall off the cliff edge. So I think a lot of people in business will be taking that to mean that there will be support. Obviously, the lockdown goes beyond the end of April. The current job retention scheme is set to expire at the end of April. I would be surprised if we don't see an extension to at least the end of July, albeit maybe back to the kind of tapering out of relief that we saw in the autumn last year. That led to job losses at the time, no doubt. That was disappointing, that was unfortunate, but I think inevitable. And I think it will happen again this time. But there's also been a reasonable amount of cautious optimism in the job market, I think. There's been some signs of recruitment increasing. The young are undoubtedly losing out, Ben. I think that 50 or 60% of those jobs that have been lost in the under 26 sort of age bracket. I think that's a reflection on the likelihood of them as a generalization, but the skill set and experience, sometimes with the youth as well, sometimes the unreliability of maybe, just that general maturity to work. But sadly, yes, it's a reflection of the training needs of the young and the support that they need. But also I'm still trying to get information on why I've not been contacted back about Kickstart. So if anybody's listening to this who's, Human Results is looking for somebody on the Kickstart scheme, maybe even more than one. So, let's do what we can to support it.
Just while you're there, Alasdair, I did see a report out this. I did see a report out this week. They're expecting employment to boom again over the next few weeks. So few months. Sorry, over now that we're opening up again, they expect it to be faster than ever. But also, then today we have the unemployment figures, which are drastic, aren't they?
It's kind sobering, Ben. They're inevitable, aren't they? I mean, obviously there's been a significant amount of jobs lost in the last 3 months. I think that the danger is how much permanent damage has been done by what is now 12 months of pandemic in the job market, in businesses. How resilient are those companies, and how resilient is the market sectors that they're in? Retail, high street retail is wrecked. John Lewis announced another 8 stores intended to close on top of the 8 last year, and that's a flagship store. That's a flagship retailer, flagship high street, stellar retailer. House of Fraser have been kicked around. Debenhams are going to the wall. That kind of traditional retailer has been dealt so many blows in recent years at the expense, of course, of home delivery and Amazon. But it's interesting that the likes of House of Fraser and John Lewis John Lewis proudly talking about clicks and bricks and the importance of a combination of the two. And yet success stories like Primark, they don't do clicks, do they? You've got to go to their stores. And at times when we've not been in complete lockdown, I suspect Primark has very quickly done well again.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've got a big week. We've got a big week, haven't we? Coming up with the budget this time next week.
Yeah, the financial situation. What we're going to see with the job retention scheme. Is that support for small businesses? What additional support over and above that for the self-employed there might be? Purely for me on the advising employers, how long will the job retention scheme continue? Are we going to see that tapered relief to the end of July? Check your resourcing as an employer. Hopefully you've managed to survive this far, and the vaccine news is obviously a huge positive. More than a third of us have been vaccinated. I've yet to be, but I am of an age where I might expect to be by end of next month into the next month. But certainly the way it's going, long before the end of May that was originally forecast for the over 50s, that's very good news. Talking to a very good friend of mine last night who's in his late 50s. He's a teacher, and he can't wait to get his vaccine because obviously he's expecting classroom teaching in a couple of weeks or so.
Yep.
And with the increased risk that might bring, but he doesn't see himself as any more special than the frontline shop workers and delivery drivers, public transport drivers and operatives who've been at the front line all this year. He knows he's been quite privileged in that regard, so he didn't get all political on me.
But I think we've got 2 points coming up. I think you're ready for it as well. Is the redundancy time when all the support goes and people realise they can't afford what they had previously. But then very very quickly, I think we're going to flip into re-employment of where they have got the gaps in the businesses. So it's obviously. They need really good advice there, don't they? Because they might be replacing one job with another, and of course they've got to be careful they're not making somebody redundant. They're replacing them with, haven't they? And things like that coming up.
That's a very good point, Ben. Very, very good point. Yes, if you've made redundancies, you need to make sure that that you're not immediately replacing like for like without giving that some further thought, and whether indeed. You shouldn't, in fact, be going back to those that you've made redundant, and you probably won't want to. That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
So, but yes, good. I mean, good recruitment decisions, Ben, are always important. You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be, at the number of disputes in the employment tribunal, especially those who've only been employed a relatively short time, but are maybe claiming a protected characteristic as a reason. As a substantial reason towards their demise in the workplace, but a lot of it stems from poor recruitment decisions, employing people not suited to that particular role, and looking for those signs are tricky. Putting a recruitment advert can carry a minor risk out with it. You'd be surprised at the number of times somebody might put in a job application and then not hear, simply because at the time it slipped through the net, but then they put a job application in under a different name short while after, and they get called to interview, and they put it down to simply that their first name might denote some ethnic minority. It happens. It happens. It's a generalization, but the point is there is risk in all that we do in life, whether it's crossing the road, running for a bus, or employing somebody. There is risk. Just recognize it. Don't be frightened of it. Just recognize it and just try and minimize it sensibly with good processes, good recruitment processes, good induction processes, good appraisal scheme and probationary period reviews. just that whole onboarding experience. It's not just about getting the right employee. It's about telling them, if they are, what a good job they're doing. So that when you make that recruitment decision and you take that person on and you invest that time and energy and money, that they're with you hopefully for the long term, and make a positive contribution to your business. So it's a two-way street. So yeah, good recruitment decisions, but also managing that risk as you transition, whether it's shrinking or growing. And,
I think now we can finally say that over the next few months, we can look at, firstly, we've got to look at the budget and what that brings next week. Of course, that's important.
For the next I'll be interested to see it. I think.
And then after that, I think we can look at the way you get your business ready, savvy to go again. And that, of course, may mean layoffs. We accept that. But then, of course, I think we can start.
It could also, of course, if you're looking towards bringing people back to work, as in physically into the workplace, because there's a lot of companies in manufacturing, for example, they've carried on manufacturing, but their central services, their sales, their accounts, those in managerial positions, they're all working from home. It might be that you need to have a proper look at whether that's a case of all back on a certain date, or whether that should be staggered and rotated. Agile working works for a lot of businesses, Ben. It's just that they sometimes needed their eyes open to it. It's worked for us, but then it always did. We have an office. I've had staff I've allowed to work from home part-time, but they've been full-time members of the team and fully contributing, and things like Zoom or Teams, as we have, and those sort of platforms, they can help. But face-to-face is nice. I mean, I think a lot of people are missing it. But you've got to provide that safe environment. We're going back to what we discussed last August, September, when we were looking to ease that sort of lockdown and get people back. You have to provide a safe environment. You've got to overcome fears. You've got to accept that these fears are not irrational. But ultimately, if you want people back, you perhaps also just have to show that they can't reasonably long term not be back. That to be effective as a team, if it needs to be that people need to be in work at the coalface and they can't work successfully from home long term, then you have to be able to spot what the reasons why and articulate that if it comes to it, and overcome those fears.
Well, the good news is that we are finally looking positive. The bad news, Alasdair, is that we'll finally be able to do some of these via actual video in an office soon. So you may need to prepare ironing shirts and things like that for your audience.
And indeed get past my lockdown haircut or lack of, and my eyebrows that are blonde and wispy, as though a blonde Dennis Healy brows developing there, Ben. And and I can't see how on earth I can last until April or so. I'm going to have to get the shears out and have a go myself. And go short's the answer, and it covers a multitude of errors.
But we do promise the podcast audience, whatever we do in video, we'll put an audio in the podcast, because we know we've got a great audience going up now, so we will do that. So great. Alasdair, thanks so much today. Really appreciate it. I know you're a very busy man. You take care, sir.
Okay, I'd like to. We'll do another one soon. We'll have to
next week
catch up after next week, maybe. Yeah,
definitely. Cheers, Alasdair.
Thanks, Ben. Cheers.